the personal statement is really one of really the only chance you sort of have to put your own voice into the application, right? The rest of it is a CV, not including the letters of recommendation, which you really usually, I mean, you don't get to write, and most of the time you don't get to see what they say.
Could you tell me a little bit about how your time is kind of divided between the three?
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that it certainly varies from from program to program. And strictly speaking, with internal medicine, a chief resident is somebody who's actually completed their residency, whereas in some specialties, the chief resident may just be in the final year of training. So I completed my residency last year, and here I spend probably 70% of my time doing a combination of teaching and management and some administrative things, which involves serving on committees and helping run the program, and around probably 20 to 30% clinical, where I serve as a hospitalist. There's 3 chief residents at my program, and I guess they say each of us serves as a third of a hospitalist throughout the year, which is a great way to sort of keep the clinical skills up to speed. But it's I think one of the reasons that I chose chief residency, and a lot of people that do that in internal medicine, is because you get the unique opportunity to hone your teaching skills and also be involved on committees and helping be a part of enacting change in the hospital.
Who decides which applicant gets interviewed? Is it the program director, assistant program director, faculty, and what's your role in that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and not something that I necessarily had much insight to probably when I was applying. And again, I'll be speaking just purely from my perspective. It's probably different at other programs as well, but here anyways, it's predominantly the program leadership, so the program director and assistant program directors who review those applications, at least to the best of my knowledge. Mm-hmm. And they, I believe have a systematic way that they review them and try to ensure that they, do a holistic review process to make sure that they're, trying to get to know the candidates as best they can, from looking at the applications, and they make those decisions about who can come to interview.
Absolutely. Is the focus still on the step 1, step 2 CK scores and, maybe attempts at CS? Is that still on the top of the list as to how programs decide whom to invite for interviews?
Yeah, that's such an interesting topic, especially in the context of news that step 1 will be pass-fail 2 years from now. I did actually some research into this because I was involved with a debate locally at one of our local conferences about step 1. And I think, certainly if you look at the data nationally, step 1 score is what's looked at the most, meaning that a lot of people look at it, but I don't know if that necessarily translates into, is that the most important thing? So this is a question that the answer probably varies, again, depending upon specialty and program. And I think the data would, answer that too. But I think that it's, certainly something that is taken, into consideration. Is it the end all be all in internal medicine? Here we're at the program that I'm in, I think the answer is no. But again, I'm not the one who's making those initial impressions. And so, but it just from, being privy to conversations and hearing, I think what our attitudes are here, at least I think it's not certainly, the end all be all, but I know that differs nationally and by program. But it is interesting, and it's something that we'll continue to learn more about, especially as we learn about what programs are going to do once step 1 is pass-fail. Mm-hmm. And so that will certainly change the approach a little bit.
Have you been noticing an increase in the number of applications in the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't give you the data for sure just based on our program, although I certainly know what the trend is nationally, and I would imagine that ours is pretty similar. But yeah, if you look at the graph, it's been a steady rise really over the last 5 to 10 years, and that becomes a challenge. It's because that's more applications to review, and you still want to, I think, be mindful of the way that you review them. And it's also, and I don't know the answer to this, but interesting I've read some articles and to think about how, this year, and I know we're going to dive into this about, how the application cycle might be different this year, but will the fact that it very likely may be remote change the number of programs that applicants apply to? I don't know, but some have speculated it might also lead to more applications this cycle as well.
Yeah. Some even suggested maybe capping the number of programs an applicant can, submit their applications to. Any thoughts on that?
It's interesting. I think that I totally understand the motivation and where that comes from. Even if you take COVID out of the equation, they say this was in a cycle where we would be traveling around, and there's good arguments on the pro side to capping, because not only does that limit the number of applications that a program may get, which would allow them, or you would think, more resources, both time and personnel wise, to review those applications, but then it would also maybe eliminate the burden, although you could also argue might increase the pressure on the applicants to do less interviews, which would save money and save time and resources there as well. But then it also becomes tricky, because then it becomes even more important how you are strategic about where you apply. And so there's certainly some applicants where they may need to apply to lots of places, and that's how, based upon their application, what they might need to do to try and secure a number of interviews. And then there's other applicants where they are perhaps applying to places they probably shouldn't have, because they wouldn't really want to consider to go to that place, and then they might be taking an interview spot from somebody else, and then there's everybody in between. So, I think in a perfect world, everybody would create a list of the programs that they think that they would like to go to for whatever reason, and that their application would be sort of maybe a good fit for, and only apply to those programs. But right. I totally understand why, and I was in their shoes too, where you want to, it's a match, and you want to make sure that you play the numbers game, right, and that you're going to get enough interviews to match and take the next step. So it's challenging.
What's the use of the personal statement?
So the personal statement is really an opportunity that you have to impart your own voice into your application and articulate, a variety of things. Some people tell a story, what motivated them to get into medicine. Some people describe, what they've done so far and where their career is going to go, and they kind of, weave in their experiences and their motivations for that. And I think that I've certainly seen a wide variety of approaches to personal statements, and I don't want to pretend to be an expert on them, because it's not something that I certainly feel confident about counseling people on what approach they should or should not take. But I do think it's a critical point of the application, and not something that should be overlooked, because it can certainly dramatically elevate your application, right? And it can also, detract from it if it's not something that's taken seriously, despite what the, CV component of the application looks like.
Right, exactly. And when you mentioned that you review the personal statement before interviewing the applicant, do you also, in the interview process, ask them, I read in your personal statement that this is what you did. Could you explain a little bit more, or talk a little bit more about it? So does it serve a purpose of generating questions for the interview?
For me personally, yes. And so I can only speak to, the approach I took this year, but absolutely. I think that, and this kind of gets to perhaps what, you're trying to get out of the interview as well. I mean, the interview is honestly as much about the applicant also learning information about the program, right? It's an opportunity to ask questions from either a chief resident or a faculty member, or a program director, when you're interviewing with various people, and you certainly want to make sure you get all your questions answered. But for us, it's also just a chance to have a communication, dialogue with you one-on-one, see how you interact, and, your professionalism, and also just get a sense try and get a sense as best we can kind of about, how serious you feel like you're taking things. And so one way to sort of start a conversation off is, absolutely, I'll take notes as I'm reviewing the application. Maybe it'll be something that I think we have in common, or something that is super interesting. And I think it also, I think it was also a way to sort of convey to the applicant, hey, I read your application. Like, I took this seriously, and I want to, get to know more about you. It also serves as a stepping stone, say if it's about a personal statement, a volunteer activity, a research project. It's also a way to see if the applicant's able to, effectively articulate their experience and describe what that experience meant to them, or how that's going to sort of affect what they do in residency or in their career and beyond. And so I think that gets to the point that, whatever is on your application, you should be able to speak to or respond to, because it's all there. And so theoretically, it's all fair game to be asked about in an interview setting.
Or, how would you describe an applicant who you feel would be a perfect fit for your residency program?
Well, that's a great question. Yeah, I think that, and again, I'm speaking from the internal medicine side of things, where I feel like sometimes our interviews, well, I can't compare it to anything else, but I feel like maybe they're a little bit more the open-ended. I don't want to say casual because it's not casual, but we're not going into them expecting to test them or ask questions to test their medical knowledge or things like that, which I don't know if that happens elsewhere, but I've heard stories. So an ideal applicant to me would be somebody who comes in is professional and is easy to have a conversation with and has without being over the top, seemingly a genuine interest not only in the specialty but also the program. And I guess what I mean by that is that they're insightful and they have questions that are unique to the program, or they might be able to ask a question about the program as it relates to them and what their career goals are. Like, so for example, like, oh, I see, you guys have a good Department of Medicine quality improvement program here, and that's something that your residents have in their second year. I'm interested in quality improvement. How would I get involved in that? And what that does is it shows that you've spent some time reviewing the program. Now, we're not expecting people to know things or memorize the website, but these are things that you can get to know easily just from perusing the website the night before the interview, from attending the pre-interview dinners. Now, as an aside, that probably won't happen this year, but I'm sure there's programs are going to find some way for you to interact with the residents. Mm-hmm. And you can pick up clues from the residents, or you can ask them, and you can sort of, arm yourself with these, tidbits or unique features, because you don't want to be in that position where somebody says something about, say, Vermont, which is where we are, or a program, and that just comes across as a surprise to you in the interview, or that, so I think, having a genuine interest and, professionalism and commitment, and then also just being able to, articulate well your experiences, right? So if I ask you a question about your research or a volunteer experience you had, or when you studied abroad, for example, just being able to talk about that. It doesn't have to be necessarily anything profound, but then just being able to, explain that and explain how it impacted you. And then I guess the last thing, and we don't always ask this question, but most people, are prepared to ask a question about what they plan to do in their career. Some interviewers will say, like, what do you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years or whatever? And certainly I would never expect anyone to know exactly what they want to do, especially in internal medicine, where, there's lots of different career paths available. But I think you should be able to articulate, at least broadly, kind of where you think you want to go, and more importantly, base that upon experiences that you've had. So if you say you want to do research, or you want to be a clinician educator, or you could base that upon experiences that you've had so far, or relate that to, and I don't know what I want to do, but I think I want to do research, or I think I want to be a educator. And so in residency, I hope to explore that more by getting involved in research, or by getting involved in a teaching academy or something like that. Oh, wow. So it's a long-winded answer, but hopefully that conveys what you were looking for.
Sure. What happens next after the interview? Yeah.
I think, there's certainly some combination of the word objective is not necessarily the word I'm looking for, but like, a way to sort of assign scores, not scores, not the right word, but some sort of value, I guess, to different components of a applicant, whether it comes to their application, their personal statement, their research, their volunteer work, extracurriculars, their interview, all these sorts of things. But then there's also certainly, and rightfully so, I think, a subjective component too, right? The intangible things that you can't score. And that's really where, when programs are creating their rank list, that's why it's a group discussion. And so people that had a personal interaction with a particular applicant are there and can, comment one way or another about why they think this person should be, where they are, or ranked higher or ranked lower, that sort of thing. So it's a combination of both, usually. I mean, at least in my experience.
What about thank you letters? Does that help at all? I mean, do you think less of an applicant just because they didn't send you a thank you letter?
Yeah, this is super. So, and again, I will, before I answer this question, I will paraphrase by that. I know there's official guidance on this from the ACGME and other places. So I'll try and paraphrase what I think it says, but that there is official guidance that I think that it was new this year or the year before on, I believe, how programs should respond to this. I mean, we're very upfront with it here about how we will never tell people not to send thank yous, right? Like well, I should say that if you are, I think, as like our program director likes to say, if you're somebody who would feel that you would be, doing something wrong based upon the values and morals that you were raised on to not send a thank you letter, by all means send one. But we tell applicants that they do not need to send one to us. And I've had other programs, I remember when I was interviewing, that that said that too. There were some that didn't say anything, and I get it. That sort of leaves the ambiguity there. It makes it a little challenging. You might feel obligated to do it because you don't want to do something that's going to be that gets you like one less point, but that's not, I think the official guidance from the ACGME is that, that it's, and again, I'm paraphrasing this, so I would fact check it, but I'm pretty sure that to try and give applicants more clarity on this, I think they have said that, thank you notes should not be something that's required or something that's expected. I mean, I think that, so I guess I won't say anything more than that because, oftentimes those thank you notes aren't, directed to me, so I'm not the one receiving them, so it's difficult for me to sort of speak as to, what effect that they have. But, I think more and more programs are being upfront about how it's not an expectation.
Yeah.
And we love it when people contact us with questions because, especially if you interview at a place early in the interview season, you really don't even, I feel like I learned so much during the process about what I actually was looking for in a program. The more places you go see or the more questions you hear other folks ask, you're like, oh, that's a good question. Maybe I should ask that next time. Right. And so oftentimes questions do come up and you want to reach out, and I would encourage you to reach out if you honestly have a question. People will definitely not be upset to hear from you. I was glad to hear from applicants who had, great insightful questions about our program. And I was more than happy to respond to them as a chief. I felt like that was one of my responsibilities was, if they reached out to us to help be an ambassador for the program.
Could you tell me now, for this year, certainly with the COVID, it has changed everything. And there was a note by AMC about, possibly trying online interviews. I think an applicant would see it in in quite a lot, different ways. One might be it's going to save a lot of time and money because, they're going to have to travel less. But from a program perspective, and as, someone who has interviewed, how does, are you comfortable deciding on a resident just by an online interview? Are you willing to take them into residency training just by an online interview? Is that how it might work?
Yeah, what a challenging question, and it's I don't know that anyone has certainly solved this, right? This is a new frontier. This is something that certainly hasn't been done before, at least on a wide scale, right? Like I'm sure from time to time because of travel or, problems or something, people have interviewed remotely, but to do it for everybody would certainly be something new. And I think anyone would be kidding themselves if they knew what the right answer was. But but at the same time, if that's the reality, then I think we need to be proactive about trying to figure out what's the best way to do this, right, for everybody that's involved. And as I said, like the interview and the visit to a program is about exchange of information both ways. Certainly it's important for the programs to get to know the applicant and interact with them. And that's not just the 10-minute, 20-minute interview between me and an applicant. That's about how the applicant's interacting with everybody and, the program administrators, the residents, how they're doing at the dinner before. So there's a lot of other things that play into that visit. But I worry more actually. I mean, it's got to be so challenging, I think, for applicants because I felt like certainly in my own experience, so much of how things played out for me was based upon my visit, right? I think it's important to get to know the hospital, get to know the location. I mean, you're more often than not going to go someplace you've never been before. And I mean, this is, again, part of my own personal bias, but this is part of what I preach to applicants all the time is that, I mean, it's important to go to a place that you think will, be, good for you, for your career. But you're also going to be living there. And it's an important thing, to think about your well-being as a person as well. And I feel like so much of those things are intangible that you can't, it's difficult. It would be really difficult to get without a visit. And getting to spend time with the residents is super valuable. People often say that the dinner before the interviews, typically programs will take the applicants out to dinner and invite only the residents without any faculty or anyone there. Oftentimes that's cited as perhaps the most helpful part of a trip, which is just because you're getting a sense of the culture and you're getting to ask some of those questions that maybe you may not be as comfortable asking in the interview. So there's a lot of things that I hope we'll be able to replicate in a virtual setting. Obviously there's no substitute for going out to dinner, but like finding a way to, get time to interact with the residents and finding a way to find, if possible, to have the applicants sit in on our educational sessions. I don't know, I'm not saying what we're gonna do. I'm just sort of making up ideas here. All these things that we normally do, it's That's got to be so challenging to find a way to replicate that. And I don't know that anyone has the perfect answer yet.
Hasn't, how do you deal with the situation where, an applicant who was interviewed, who's had the first interview with you and other faculty members, they kind of reach out to you saying, hey, I really like the program. I want to come for a second visit, a second look. Is that something that that's, commonly done, or is that something that's, I don't know, discouraged? How do you deal with those kind of requests?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm not someone who necessarily fields those, but I can tell you just based upon my experience, again, where I am now, I would say it's definitely not common. It has happened. I think it's becoming super common now for most medical schools, which I wasn't aware of, but I just heard through the grapevine. It's a very common thing for medical schools to have almost an official, second look. I would say that's not the case, at least, again, in my personal experience for residency applications. But by all means, it's just sort of like I said earlier about, our goal is to make sure you have all of your questions answered and you have all the information you need to make the most informed decision you can about this very important process. And so if those questions can be answered, via a Zoom meeting or via a telephone call, perfect. If there's some reason why you feel like it's important for you to come back and, visit and, sit in on an educational session, round with the team, see more about the area, I'm sure that those things could be arranged. I guess, again, without speaking more specifics, I haven't been involved with determining that, although I have, say helped give somebody a tour when they come back, for an extra look. So I know it happens, but I would say it's pretty infrequent.
Yeah, yeah.
And that in part, honestly, had to do with probably time away from rotations, travel costs, and, trying to fit that into all the other interviews. So there's a lot of
Absolutely, yeah.
Competing interests there.
Absolutely, yeah. How do applicants respond to if you ask something like, why should we take you into our program?
I've only been on the receiving end of those questions.
Oh God.
I've never asked anybody, but I've certainly been asked that myself, and that's oh boy, that's I think
Tough
one of the
one, right?
toughest questions. Certainly something I think everybody should be prepared to answer, right? There's a few
Right.
questions that you should, whether you're going to get asked or not, you should be able to ask why you're interested in your particular specialty, kind of where you see yourself in the future. And particularly that one, like, basically someone's asking you to sell yourself, to them, give a sales pitch. I would tread lightly because I'd hate to give the wrong advice, right?
Absolutely.
I don't want someone to, but I think, I could think about that one. I sort of just think about how I approached that question was certainly you want to know kind of what your strengths are, right? And you want to, emphasize those, whether it's, an experience you had even before medical school or during medical school. Maybe you're, about research or teaching, like I said, or maybe you've had a lot of diverse, volunteer experiences or something like that. Sort of highlighting, I think, what makes you unique. But then also just conveying it in a very sort of positive, energetic sense, and sort of why would I want you as my colleague, right? I want you to, to get a sense that you're somebody who would be good to work with, that you're reliable, that you're smart, that you're interested, that you have plans, and that you're motivated to get involved. And are you going to be a good citizen and help make the program a better place than it was when you arrived? But then also it'd be interesting, if you're answering that question, to try and weave in, like I was saying earlier, something unique about the program that you're interviewing at, right? So knowing what your goals are, knowing what you're interested in, I think I would be a great fit to come to your program because I'm interested in this and I know you have this opportunity for me there and I'm really interested in that. That would be, a great answer. I think,
Absolutely.
because it shows that you're prepared and you have, you've thought about what it is about this particular place.
Absolutely. Plus, and also at the same time highlighting one's strengths that make them a good fit for the program. So that's fantastic. All right, Dr. Wahlberg, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and all the very best as you move on to the next phase of your career. And so thank you again very much. Really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. And best of luck to everyone. I know this is going to be a very interesting year. So all the best.
Thank you.